The $50 million game is officially sold out. Another coach out in Major League Soccer. We remember FIFAGate 10 years later with writer Harry Bushnell. That and more on Wednesday's Morning Kickaround. Hello and welcome to the show. The sound of Franz Beckenbauer means just one thing. You found your way to Morning Kickaround, where we cover the world's favorite game from the world's favoriteest country, coming to you live each Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I'm Robert Kerr. He's Jason Davis. Thank you for joining us here on a Wednesday, back from the long Memorial Day weekend. I'm feeling a touch overwhelmed with the amount of stuff that happened and is happening since, I'm checking back into the real world from a great holiday. I'm trying to catch up. How you feeling, Mr. Davis?
Yeah, I think your hair belies your concerns or your inability to catch up properly, I guess. Rob.
Can you call me Doc for the rest of the episode?
You want to be Doc Brown from
I'm feeling that way.
Right.
I didn't get to see the top of the hair. Producer Jenny, is usually 3 box in the pre-show, and so my top of my head is cut off.
Can you do a Christopher Lloyd? Do you have one?
Marty.
It's not bad. It's not bad. Just one word. That's all it takes. All right, shout out.
But it's instantly recognizable. Credit to Doc Brown, but instantly recognizable. But we got a show full of great segments on the way, including a great guest at the top of the hour. But first, if you are watching this, haven't hit subscribe just yet, do so now. And then you can take it a step further, become a member, and then we can become a member of the MK Ultras. It is a great way to support the show each step of the way. Subscriber numbers are ticking up. We're working our way towards 2,500 or so, Jason?
Yeah, I mean, we're climbing. That's the goal, just to keep climbing, keep growing. Of course, not only do we want subscribers, members, as it says there at the screen, let's see if we can get a couple members added to the MK Ultras before the end of this show today, because that's how we keep it growing. That's how we keep going. That's how we become bigger and better and more fun and add more things and do more content and all of that.
If we hit that goal, I will go to 10,000 gigawatts of energy, and my hair will do similar if we hit that goal. Follow us on social media at Kickaround, X, Instagram, and Blue Sky. Write us a note, morningkickaround@gmail.com, or find us as a podcast. If you can just put us in your ear, and there's also video versions on Spotify too.
Go to Spotify. Go to Spotify and watch the show on Spotify after the fact. That's a good thing for us.
Yeah, Spotify video is now a thing. All right, support the show, do all the things. Let's hit some goals. Now let's kick some long balls to kick off Wednesday morning's Morning Kickaround. The soccer game worth $50 million has sold out. Long ball number 1 here today. Probably the biggest prize money for any club game here on North American shores. The powers that be got what they want. A sold-out stadium in California just 2 weeks before the tournament kicks off. LAFC versus Club America, a sold-out show for a dubious but apparently very attractive game.
I mean, we said this. I mean, of course, people are going to want to see what goes down in Los Angeles. People are going to want to see which one of these teams gets into the Club World Cup. Again, no matter how ridiculous that whole competition is, no matter how much of a dog and pony show or how little actual prestige that competition has, and we don't know how seriously the European clubs are going to take it yet, it is a big deal for North American teams. It would be a massive deal for Club America to be involved, to be alongside those European champions, those European qualifiers. Same thing for the South Americans and all that. And of course, for LAFC, it's the same deal. I think I'm on the record. This is the biggest one-off match between an MLS team and a Mexican club in history. And of course it's going to sell out. There are lots of Club America fans in LA. There are LAFC fans. And last time I checked, Rob, there are some LAFC fans in LA, right? Oh, did I lose Rob? Oh, look at that. He was frozen, and now he's gone, and I don't know what's happening. So maybe in the chat, you guys have some thoughts about this LAFC Club America matchup, because for me, it speaks to some of the problems, and we're going to talk more about this with our friend Henry Bushnell from Yahoo Sports when we get into 10 years later, what happened after the Zurich raids and where FIFA is, because this of course is Gianni Infantino's baby. He is the one pushing this expanded, bloated version of the Club World Cup and jamming it into a summer when players might rather rest, when there is absolute reason that players and some of these clubs could be a little hostile to the idea of what the Club World Cup now is. And I guess if you are a more is more person, there's never an end. Gianni Infantino is a more is more person. I do think there's a balance, right? I'm a soccer fan. I've said before, I don't know that you can have too much soccer in your life, but at some point there will become a level of diminishing returns when it comes to this competition, when it comes to where we are with the game in this country. I mean, that game sold out. Club America visiting Los Angeles to play LAFC for one more spot in the Club World Cup sold out. But if you check the internet, you'll see that many Club World Cup games not even close to selling out. That prices are now dropping in response to the fact that people aren't really all that interested in this competition, right? Gianni Infantino and FIFA, and if you want to blame the whole organization, brought this competition to these shores because what they wanted to do was milk American soccer fans for everything we're worth. And I can be offended by that, even as I'm intrigued by the idea of what this could be. But I have the same vibe around this that I had around the Leagues Cup. I think you can justify, if you're Major League Soccer, if you're Liga MX, and if you think you're always in competition with everybody else, if you think you're always in competition with European leagues and clubs for the attention of soccer fans around the world, soccer fans in your own backyard, because of course MLS and Liga MX have to compete with the Premier League and the Champions League and everything that happens in Europe for attention here, you can justify something like the Leagues Cup, because what options do we have as North American leagues? We have no access to the Champions League of Europe, so we have to do something unique to draw attention. Let's do this competition between the two leagues. But only a couple years into this, they're now going, well, actually, this isn't as great as we thought it was going to be, and it's actually a burden for our clubs, and nobody really seems that enthusiastic. So let's scale it back. And I don't think we're too long away, Rob, welcome back, from the Leagues Cup having the plug pulled on it. So does that augur bad things for the Club World Cup in this version under Gianni Infantino? Or are we, and I don't know if anybody's at this place, are we witnessing the birth of what will become this massively important, prestigious competition that in 30 or 40 years' time will be remembering the very first one in the United States?
Yeah, where do you find the barometer? You talk to a lot of soccer people day to day. You get a lot of callers, and I feel like you hear quite a few different opinions on this. I mean, you're painting the picture here, like drawing the parallel with the Leagues Cup, and that's being scaled back. Do you feel like are you trying to say that maybe we're dealing with a already future failure before it begins here?
I mean, I think the market is saturated. The soccer market is saturated. And of course, some of this has to do, and this is why it's so odd that, well, not odd, this is why it's kind of like you look sideways at Gianni and FIFA for this, because they are jamming this down our throats at the same time that players are saying we're playing too much soccer, and that is going to have a negative effect, which is going to suffer more from players being overburdened, Rob, the club game or the international game?
You think the club game eventually? I think everything in general, macro
the
sense.
the international game initially, because players are going to go, well, maybe I got to skip this tournament, or maybe I got to skip these friendlies, or maybe I can't go to this camp because I've got too many games for my club team. And guess who pays the bills? Not the national team, not the national team programs. The club teams play the bills for the top players around the world. So if anybody loses out, it's going to be the international game. And while I'm sure FIFA would love to see the Club World Cup become this massive thing, and they can also suckle at the teat of the club game because they can organize an international tournament of this scope, it's the international game. It's country v country. It's Euros, which is UEFA, not FIFA, worth noting. It's the World Cup. It's all those World Cup tournaments that are ultimately going to suffer most from this.
Kind of funny comment from the listener here, Andy. No one jams anything soccer down my throat. I choose to care. I'm curious which club or aspect of this tournament do you choose to care? But I don't know if you touched on this as I popped out for a second there, but do you feel that with this, the interest being high enough to, kicking a team out of the Club World Cup and then inviting two very popular teams, to play this play-in game, and then now that's sold out, do you feel like, the powers that be are getting what they wanted here?
I mean, this game is not indicative of the overall popularity of this tournament. It doesn't portend some massive success for the Club World Cup. We don't know. And right now, I don't think the signs are pointing in the direction that the Club World Cup is going to be a massive hit this summer. Again, ticket sales are slow for those other games. For the most part, there are going to be games with very few people in the building, right? Because you can't have massive European club versus massive European club in every match. It's not how it works if you're doing a World Cup with every confederation represented. So you're going to have games where there are not that many people in the building. And FIFA can do whatever they want. They can lower the prices. They can try to paper the room. But I don't think they're going to get 40,000 people for some of these games. So that's going to be a bad look. And then we don't know exactly what the television situation is going to be. I know it's been sub-licensed and there's going to be games on available places. But, again, they needed Saudi Arabia's PIF to do a solid to DAZN in order for this to even get the kind of contract Johnny was assuring everybody it was going to generate.
Yeah, a note overseas that I think ITV, one of the biggest carriers of soccer products over there in the UK, bid like $1 comically for it or something like that. So that was probably one of the bigger audiences that powers that be were probably looking for to make the Club World Cup what they are looking to make it. We'll see what happens there. Second long ball of the morning here. Olaf Mellberg, the third Major League Soccer manager fired in 2025. He is relieved of duties in St. Louis, where they remain in 14th position in the West with a 2-5-8 record, 11 points. What are your thoughts on his dismissal? And then we'll kind of get to see if that was just. Are they underperforming? Is there larger questions here?
I think there are organizational issues in St. Louis. I think Lutz Pfannenstiel is going to rightfully get some heat here and probably deserves it. I'm going to share this. This is just the top part of the announcement that landed in the inbox with St. Louis City making their change. I am fascinated by this wording. St. Louis City SC releases head coach Olaf Mellberg, and my joker on Blue Sky was he an injured raccoon that they nursed back to health and now they're releasing him? Like, what?
Here you go, Stripes. Get back out there, buddy.
It's so funny the way that they phrased this because they're being so careful not to say he was fired. The man was fired. They announced the release. That's not how this works. He was booted. He was defenestrated or whatever it is out of St. Louis. He got how many games did he get? 14, 15 games? 15
not a lot
games.
Of games. Yeah.
Not a lot of games, which indicates that they saw real problems. Now, here's another portion of this press release. Don't worry about the top. It does say David Critchley will assume first team manager responsibilities while they look for a new head coach. I don't know what kind of candidate they're looking for. I'm going to read that bottom quote. The decision to part ways with Olaf goes beyond just results. We've analyzed the team's performance across a number of factors, including the need to execute against a style of play that led to the team's initial success and has been part of our DNA for 4 years. That's the Bradley Carnell version, the original St. Louis City that kind of took the league by storm by, let's be honest, benefiting from a bunch of mistakes by other clubs.
Yeah.
As a club, we have certain standards we need to meet and believe a coaching change was necessary to improve our overall performance and return to a winning culture. Our fans deserve a better performing team, and we intend to give them one, said Lutz Pfannenstiel. They hired him. They had to have done some research, right? They weren't like, you know what, Olaf Mellberg, that dude has a great beard. Let's get him to St. Louis. Or he coached in flip-flops one time, or slippers, or whatever it was, famously, when he was starting his managerial career. It had to be, we see the way he plays is a fit for St. Louis. And if they did not do that research and make a decision to hire him because of his style of play, whoa, what does that say about St. Louis City and their decision making? And I will grab here from Matt Doyle. That's that guy's name, armchair analyst. You might know him from MLSsoccer.com.
Mm-hmm.
Fourth coach in 2.5 years. Can't sign a decent center back. Can't get a winger who's able to beat anyone off the dribble. DP number 9 stinks. Not promoting any academy kids or draft picks into meaningful minutes. And by the way, that is a crime in St. Louis of all places. One of the few places in this country where soccer truly matters culturally, where high school soccer is a big deal, a city that has produced more than their share. I mean, by virtue of that culture, you would assume that they have. There are a long list of professionals that have come out of St. Louis. A part of that 1950 team that beat England was a bunch of St. Louis guys. I mean, this is a city that likes soccer. This is a city where kids play soccer because they think it's important. How do you not have more kids coming through? I know it's only a couple years in, but you should have done better with this. And Matt goes on to say that Olaf did a bad job, but he's a fall guy. This is bigger than one dude. And again, if the buck's going to stop anywhere, Rob, where's it going to stop in St. Louis?
For context to the listeners who don't watch St. Louis each and every week, the lone win for St. Louis since March was a Open Cup win against Union Omaha. The only wins of the season so far, March 9th away versus LA Galaxy, who hasn't won a game yet. And then at home, March 15th against Seattle. So you can't say that it hasn't been coming. I mean, a 1-0 loss, 1-0 loss, 2-0 loss, 2-1 loss, a couple draws in there, but they haven't, gotten a win in a very, very long time. And we've had the conversation. It seems imbalanced because we had the conversation. Granted, he has a lot more credibility and longevity in the league, but we were talking last week about, is MLS too soft on coaching because they extended Vanny in Los Angeles. There's a coach in Florida that might be a little bit protected from scrutiny, but here in the middle of the country, for a newer team, for a coach that doesn't have a lot of credibility, the leash a little bit short.
Yeah, it's not a lot of games. I mean, I suppose if you want to be kind to Mellberg, you could argue he did not have enough time in St. Louis. But I don't think it's wrong that MLS clubs have high standards. And let's make it about promotion and relegation for just a second, Rob, because this is always going to come into the picture when you talk about accountability with head coaches. You're always going to be talking, well, why would a club make a change if they can finish 9th, make the playoffs, and challenge for a title? Will they win it? I mean, recent history says if you finish lower than 4th, you're probably not winning an MLS Cup. Recent history also says that if you don't value possession, you're probably not winning an MLS Cup, and maybe that's a different question philosophically for these clubs. So there's not a lot of reason sort of within the season to fire a coach unless you were just applying your own standard. You're basically saying we need to deliver better because our fans deserve better or because we have a higher level of expectation. We don't want to be an also-ran who finishes 9th. Right? Again, look at Atlanta United. Atlanta United finished 9th last year with an interim head coach, beat Inter Miami in the playoffs, and then, hey, you know what? We got to find the right guy. Now, did they find the right guy? That's still an open question, and we'll talk about that later.
Yeah.
But I think that speaks to something about this idea, and it's not a substitution for what promotion and relegation would do, or relegation would do as a threat to clubs and force their hand when we're talking about firing managers. Right. But I do think that in the absence of relegation, which may never come to Major League Soccer, and we hope it does. I mean, we're all hopeful that it does. Let's pray to the soccer gods right now that relegation comes to MLS one day, because it would be great to have an integrated pyramid in America. But if it doesn't, then we need these clubs individually to decide, hey, we're not happy just being middle of the pack. We're not happy maybe making a run in July and August and somehow sneaking into the postseason. We want our team to play better, to get better results week in and week out, because what does that do? Raises the value of the regular season, create greater intensity in games. We got a round of midweek games tonight, Robin, and there's a chance when we talk about the MLS hot seat later on in the show, there's a chance that some coaches will have their job riding on what goes down tonight, or it will tick that pressure up just a little bit if they don't get the result they're supposed to this evening.
A double dismissal week, perhaps. We shall see with those midweek fixtures. And well said is, I agree with your point, is hopefully working towards a future where American soccer, there is some real weight to every single match that's on the schedule. Long ball 3 here on Wednesday. A coach that could be on the hot seat and a team that's underperforming, but still squeaking out some points here and there. Inter Miami, the poster boys for that team.
I want you to set up this story, but I do want to give Angus, who is a member of Morning Kickaround and MK Ultra, his flowers here with his comments. He says Melbourne, he means Mellberg, obviously. His dismissal is a warning to their upper management. St. Louis interim coach was labeled a caretaker, which is interesting language in America. We don't typically use that. They are on the hunt for another. They're making it clear that they're not going to just settle with Critchley for the year, that they're looking for somebody else. And again, this comes back to Lutz Pfannenstiel, who has played the role of the smartest man in the room since he's taken over. Like, oh, we don't need big names. Our fans are going to come out. We can play this way. We're going to decode Major League Soccer. We're going to, and again, initially with that success under Bradley Carnell and the high intensity pressing game that they were playing, they had some success. And Angus is saying that at least one supporter group in St. Louis is ready to take action. This is another way for pressure to be applied. Now, some clubs famously don't listen to their supporters or don't listen to their supporters groups. But if you have some that are vocal and they're willing to make a stand and do things and don't protest, don't overly protest, right? Don't protest to the point that it loses its power. But if you are willing to make a stand when things are worse than they should be, when you have high expectations, then clubs will have to listen. Go ahead, Rob.
Move on to long ball number 3 here.
Yes, sir.
All right. Inter Miami, they pulled out a 3-3 to the chagrin of Mike Thomas over the weekend. But the poster boys for the Inter Miami project, Leo Messi and one under fire, Luis Suarez, maybe adding a new distraction to the mix. There's been a little bit of talk of Suarez's playing time and his productivity. And then also, I don't know if the extensions to their contracts has been 100% locked in just yet, but add to the mix a new team in Uruguay for the powerful, should we call them a power duo?
Yeah, sure. We can call them a dynamic duo, I guess.
From Spain to Florida to Uruguay, MLS's power duo expanding their future, maybe beyond their playing career.
Something like that.
So in a video announcement, Luis Suarez and Leo Messi announced that they are taking over ownership of Deportivo LSM. And that's a renaming of Uruguayan team that, like I said, the power duo for Inter Miami have taken up as a new pursuit in their footballing lives.
Yeah, so this will open up a question as these guys move into club ownership. And I think, does Messi have an option a la David Beckham to somehow get involved in club ownership, maybe in Miami specifically, rather than his own expansion team like Beckham did? But this, I don't know. This is an interesting development for me, right? Because we've got the guys in England that are part of Salford City. Beckham's involved in that. Those are former players, right? Where else are their current players involved in owning clubs? And how can you be both a club owner and a player, I think is a question. We wanted to watch the video a little bit, right? Rob, did we want to do that?
At least, it's got a fun open at least.
Let's watch. This is in Spanish, so if you don't speak Spanish, it can be a little tough. But here is the video that Luis Suarez put on his social media to announce Deportivo LASM, Deportivo LSM. I guess we're in Uruguay. I guess that's
Hola
where we
a
are.
todos, espero que estén muy bien. Hoy quería compartir con todos ustedes algo muy importante, un proyecto familiar que todos conocen, el Deportivo LS. Esto es un sueño familiar que empezó allá en 2010.
Said it was a family dream to have this. Now, we're not going to listen to Luis Suarez describe this is a 5-minute video. I mean, there's just a lot of Luis just sitting there talking to the camera, I guess outlining why he's doing this, what this is all about, what he hopes to achieve with it. Don't know what else we got here. We'll see. I'm still going. What this is obviously
it's a good note to think that this club is actually they're starting from the bottom. They're starting in the Uruguayan 4th division, so they're not just parachuting into the top.
Yeah, I mean, they're obviously buying at the lowest level, so the lowest level of investment. It could be interesting from Nate, who's a member, the new Latin American Wrexham. Maybe they're seeing it this way. I don't know. Is there a content plan? I would imagine there is, right? A content plan around this team.
Is there any plans made in modern sport that doesn't have a content plan?
That's a good question, and I think you're probably right. Now, obviously, we've already given it away that Messi's involved. This is a lot of Suarez. This is we're at almost 4 minutes of just Luis Suarez on camera.
We started to doubt if he was going to appear when we were working through this.
I imagine that T-shirt is a $500 white T-shirt, because why wouldn't you be doing that? We're 4 minutes in. Luis Suarez still talking. Oh, here we go. Here's the moment.
El proyecto profesional de Deportivo LSM.
Bueno, primero que nada quería agradecerle a Luis por darme esta oportunidad, por invitarme a unirme con él, a compartir este proyecto el cual venís trabajando hace muchísimos años ya, el cual...
I mean, these guys are boys, so right? Their relationship runs deep from their time at Barcelona together. Obviously, Suarez is playing in Miami because he wanted a chance to play with Messi again. I'm imagining a Messi. I don't know what the like. Is this one of those deals where Messi is just applying his name to this, Rob, and so it adds some cachet to the club, and really the money is Luis Suarez's money, because then it's happening in Uruguay. It's not happening in Argentina. It feels more Suarez's project. Again, we got 4.5 minutes, 5 minutes of Suarez before Messi showed up on camera to say thank you I want to thank Luis for inviting me to be part of this. Do we think that Messi really is going to be hands-on in any particular way?
You think he's probably going to answer some questions or put in his 2 cents and stuff like that. But if we are going on a ownership interest level at minutes on the screen here, and maybe a 4 to 5, 4/5 Luis Suarez project, hometown, in the article that I was perusing to look a little further into this, it kind of essentially the translation here was eventually like, Louis was in, so I'm in. Was
right.
Kind of the quote.
Right.
But it also speculates maybe this opens them up to like become a ownership group like larger than that together, maybe spread into Argentina.
What do you think of the logo? What do you make of the logo? I mean, it's a pretty boring name, Deportivo LSM. It's just the boring name. But what do you make of the logo? Because the S and the M are doing this weird marriage thing there.
And would you call that only 1/5 or 4/5 of an M there for the Messi?
I don't know. I don't know.
I don't hate it, but I feel like you're going towards a green themed jersey, and not a lot of successful teams wear green. Sorry to any like Werder Bremen fans or other green rocking teams, but green is not the most successful sports.
Wow.
Soccer
You're
team
saying
color.
Green may be unlucky for them, is what you're saying. That's
I mean, if you look at the root logic of why teams adopted red, was because it catches the eye streaking down the wing. And what color is a soccer field, Jason?
These days, you wear red if you want to capture the Asian market. That's why you wear red. They're not doing that. At least they're not catering, right? Like they're not pandering to anybody. Again, it feels like a passion project for Luis Suarez. Probably he doesn't have much longer on the field. This will be his thing that he goes on and does. And if Messi can add some name recognition, helps the excitement. I don't know if he's got any actual money in it. Maybe he does. Then this will be fascinating. I don't even really think it's going to be that big of a deal for Inter Miami before Suarez rides off into the sunset.
So you don't think Inter Miami misses the playoffs this year in Major League Soccer because they bought a team in Uruguay?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. It'll be interesting though if the Uruguayan team is more successful than Inter Miami. How people will read that, but yeah, no.
Yeah, so you're saying Deportivo LSM for Supporters Shield 2027?
Sure. Why not? Why not? Maybe they will find a way. I mean, who knows? You make a good point about them coming up from the bottom of the pyramid, and maybe in a couple of years they're playing the Copa Libertadores or something. They can't leave Uruguay obviously, but they can become again the Wrexham of Uruguay. It's a good shout.
We have a great guest, Harry Bushnell, waiting in the wings. But before we get to him, like and subscribe to the channel. If you're watching this, haven't hit subscribe yet, do so now. Doesn't cost you a darn thing. Helps grow this channel. Want to take it to the next level? Membership. Lots of bonuses and benefits to that, including the Discord, which has been hotting up. Some great threads going on in the morning Kickaround Discord. Big perk of being a member. Follow us on social media at mkickaround on X, Instagram, Blue Sky. morningkickaround@gmail.com is the place to send an email or find us as a podcast, Morning Kickaround, on your favorite podcast platform. All right. We are going to take a quick breath and come right back with today's memory hole here on Morning Kickaround. Memory hole here on Morning Kickaround this week marks the 10-year anniversary of FIFAGate, the controversy that maybe dethroned the leadership in FIFA. And to talk about it, we have a special guest, Henry Bushnell, a senior reporter for Yahoo Sports. Welcome to Morning Kickaround, sir.
Appreciate you guys having me. I'm honored to be here.
I appreciate the time, Henry. Henry wrote a 2-part series marking the 10-year anniversary of what Rob just described as FIFAGate. It was the Zurich raids, a bunch of soccer officials being arrested famously in a hotel and all of that. And Henry...
The shower of dollars picture that time.
Well, it was around that time for sure. The Sepp Blatter era was wild on many fronts. And there's a lot of information in your story, Henry, about sort of, the lead up to it, how the United States took the lead and why. I guess maybe let's go back in time. Let's go back to 2015. What precipitated all of that happening and FIFA officials coming under suspicion and ultimately being arrested and charged by the Department of Justice?
Yeah, I mean, the story even goes back, and I didn't get too much into this in my pieces because it's been pretty well covered, but the story goes back even further. I mean, it goes back decades and decades. Bribery in soccer, especially, attached to all these, broadcast rights deals and everything had been going on for decades. The U.S. authorities kind of latched on in the 2010, 2011 range, and it had been investigating this stuff for years, but always in the background. There were a few leaks here and there, but it didn't fully rise to the surface until May 27th, 2015, when it all not just rose to the surface, but kind of exploded and became this huge reckoning. And it was interesting, talking to people who worked on this case. Like bribery in soccer was this it was kind of like an open secret that soccer was super corrupt. But nobody, no like soccer entity wanted to do anything about it. And because of the power dynamics within FIFA, within soccer, and no government or law enforcement authority really wanted to do anything about it because of the political power that soccer and social power that soccer has. And how important it is to the national identity of a lot of these countries. And so the U.S. in a lot of ways was the only country that was both willing and capable of doing this. And they exposed a lot of it, certainly not all of it. They didn't get as far as I think some people thought that they could get in terms of touching all, getting all the criminals that were corrupting soccer. But they certainly, prompted a big reckoning and a big scandal.
And so it seemed like from reading your article, you kind of outlined how it's a little bit of a mirror of where we're at. Like there was a big reckoning, but over time through spinning the narrative and from kind of the power vacuum that led to Infantino coming in and what he's been able to do with that since. Would you say that there has been meaningful change in 10 years since the corruption was officially documented as being corrupt?
I mean, it's really complicated. There has certainly been some change. I think that the consensus and kind of the middle ground viewpoint that a lot of people would come to is there has been some changes, many of them positive, but the core structure of FIFA and the central power dynamics that have always been problematic with so much influence concentrated in the FIFA president and the presidents of the confederations, that really hasn't changed at all. And if anything, like this patronage network that everybody talks about has just gotten stronger and more ingrained because there's more money than ever before being handed out by FIFA to all these national federations. So I think, and that is kind of at the root of why a lot of people say that no, there hasn't been much meaningful change.
It seems as though the upshot here is that with the paper bags full of money and all of that was ultimately uncovered. I mean, we all knew what was going on, but the DOJ decided to do something about it. It kind of created a vacuum that was then filled by someone so craven and blatant in his desire to sort of squeeze the game for every drop of money it's worth. And Gianni Infantino, that there hasn't been as much good that came from it as could have. And I'm looking at right now a statement from something called Fair Square. I'm sure you know about this, Henry, a joint statement that says, quote, FIFA arguably more poorly governed today than a decade ago. And this does come down, it seems, and you outline this in the story, it comes down to the fact that Gianni Infantino has consolidated power and ultimately made this about his will as much as anything else.
Yeah, totally. And the interesting part of it is that, at least as far as we know, Gianni Infantino isn't necessarily doing anything that is against the rules. Like, he is not like taking money, as far as we know, he's not taking money under the table or anything like that. It just goes back to the structure. And in a way, you could argue that he is just serving the game really well. Like, making the World Cup even more profitable than it already was. You could argue how much he is responsible for that and how much the responsibility is just that the game of soccer is incredible and the World Cup is incredible. But like, FIFA is making a lot more money and will make a lot more money in 2026 and beyond than it has in the past. And some of that money does flow down to the confederations and the federations who are able to use it for soccer development. So that's why in the headline of one story, we put the word duality. Like, there's nothing necessarily inherently bad about trying to make more money, but it is also inherently tied to just this power structure that gives him so much influence of everything that happens in soccer.
It's much more exploitative than it is criminal these days, right? Is that, I mean, I'm being very basic in sort of framing that, but it does seem as though, again, we're seeing it. And I've, noting the 10-year anniversary, seeing your story drop, being on Blue Sky, which is my preferred social media outlet these days. I saw a comment that said, FIFA has moved from being a deeply corrupt organization in which relentless graft took place just off stage, where the president could alternately ignore and disparage it, Sepp Blatter, to a deeply corrupt organization in which the president has brought it center stage, normalized it, and embraced it wholeheartedly. And again, this feels like very reflective of our political moment, Henry.
Yeah, I think the political moment is definitely an interesting part of it. And one of the things that people told me throughout this is that I think the word normalized is interesting because it has been normalized in a lot of way by not just the United States government, but governments around the world. And like I think our tolerance of not necessarily, it's not necessarily like the old school type of corruption, like the money under the table, but just like poor governance and conflicts of interest and all this. Our tolerance of it has just like we've gotten more used to it. And it's difficult to call it out every time it happens because it just gets so tiresome. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So
one of the parts of your article that I found interesting, one of the things that stood out the most was that you pointed out that in 2015, it was because soccer was not as entwined with like the nation. They were the ones that were able to make that move and to do the investigation. But now I think it was former prosecutors or someone you referenced that said that they couldn't even really necessarily see that. And maybe the only governance that might want to engage in that would be the European Union, which seems like a little bit of a stretch there, right?
Yeah, and that's one of the, this came up throughout the reporting process too, and it was one of the reasons we chose to write the story now. It's the 10th anniversary, but it's also an interesting moment in that this is the first time major FIFA tournaments are coming to the United States since then, right? And it really marks a pretty remarkable turnaround. In 2015, 2016, nobody could have imagined the U.S. hosting a World Cup. And now, not only is the U.S. hosting a World Cup, it's hosting the Club World Cup. It's going to host the Women's World Cup. It could host other FIFA tournaments between now and then. And FIFA seems incredibly tight with the current U.S. presidential administration. So it's really a remarkable turnaround. And in some ways, obviously FIFA will argue that that's necessary. When you're hosting a World Cup here, you need to have a close relationship with the government. But from the government's perspective, there are many obvious reasons not to pursue a big investigation like this now. And that's why a lot of people don't really see it as anything along these lines as feasible in the near future.
Henry, when I was a slightly younger man, and I was, doing things, talking about soccer on the internet, when I had my old show, Soccer Morning, that was during this era. And I remember being fairly adamant that the only way change was coming is if some of these nations decided they had to take a moral stand and maybe pull away from FIFA. And they're this is all pipe dreams and head in the cloud stuff, I think, for a lot of soccer fans. But because we have to do those mental gymnastics to watch a World Cup run by an organization like FIFA, especially during the Sepp Blatter era, this was the thought. Like the United States, Brazil, England, some of these massive soccer nations would need to pull out of FIFA in order for there to be real change. I don't see that happening. Everything is so intertwined, obviously. They're all beholden to FIFA. Again, Johnny has, as you outlined, made sure the money is flowing in a way that it doesn't benefit any of these nations in terms of the bottom line. It would have to be a completely moral stand. Is that really the only way that things change, though? I mean, what could ultimately really change the way football is governed, or is there a sense that this is just how it's always going to be?
Yeah, I think the slightly more realistic but still pretty unrealistic scenario is that you get some sort of, whether it's the European Union or some sort of other intergovernmental agency that decides, soccer is so poorly governed that we have to step in and regulate it. And like the European Union could say, if you, FIFA, or if you, UEFA, or if you, X governing body, want to operate in our territory, you have to meet these set of governance standards, or you have to follow these rules. And so legally they could do that. Now, what's the reason to do that? That's what, it's very politically difficult for the reasons we mentioned earlier. Like soccer is so important and so tied to national governments in a lot of these countries. It's kind of a version of what there's been talk of a regulator in England, right?
Yeah,
For British soccer. And it's met so much pushback. And just imagine if you were to try to do that across, the entire European Union, there would be immense resistance. So it really doesn't seem politically feasible. And like what a few people told me is it would take some sort of massive scandal, right? And if this 2015 scandal was pretty massive, and if even that didn't compel the EU to do anything, and if our standards have lowered now 10 years later, and our tolerance for this type of thing is increased, then it's pretty darn tough to see it happening anytime soon.
Yeah. I once thought and maybe expressed that it seemed as though FIFA was boxing themselves in, where the only places that could host their major tournaments were autocracies, were the places where, the rules could be handed down top to bottom and nobody could say anything. Democracy would be tough because people would push back against some of the moral failures of FIFA, or some of the, the way that, say, Chicago or Vancouver ultimately decided they didn't want to host World Cup games because of the rules imposed by FIFA. But I guess I didn't account, Henry, for the possibility that the world as a whole would move in a direction closer to FIFA, which is troubling to me.
Yes. And the other part of that is because it's interesting around the 2026 World Cup, like you mentioned Chicago and Vancouver, they're, in general, a lot of the cities are like kind of clashing with FIFA over just, some of it is certainly harder for FIFA to organize a World Cup here than it is in Saudi Arabia when you have all these private interests that can push back rather than just a more centralized top-down structure that can play by, is willing to play by FIFA's rules for the kind of some of the intangible benefits that it gives them. But the World Cup is there is so much money to be made off the World Cup that FIFA can still give some of it to other local entities and still profit so much itself. That's why I think, you're seeing, for example, with the Women's World Cup, we'll see the next three in Brazil, the US, and then the UK. Because it's, those aren't necessarily autocratic countries, but the tournaments are so profitable now that the FIFA is willing to tolerate some of the difficulties that come with that.
Henry Bushnell, bringing up some interesting topics and globe spanning intrigue and a lot of dipping into politics, but not all of your writing is like that. You want to tell the viewers where they can find all your various writing?
Yeah, I'm on Blue Sky, as Jason said earlier. That is the medium of choice at this point. And also, you can find it on my author page at Yahoo Sports.
Well, Henry, thank you so much for joining us here on Morning Kickaround. Plenty of food for thought moving forward. Thank you so much for joining us here. Subscribers or viewers that haven't hit subscribe yet, do so now. Tell 4 friends, and then we will be able to do this show at a bigger level, have more guests, more participation, and really, grow upon what we've started here in this first few months. Morning Kickaround only started about a couple months ago, and we're already, getting a good foundation here.
Maybe we can be the ones to lead the charge for, to break away from FIFA and start our own international soccer governing body. Maybe that's too big. Maybe we need to start smaller. Sorry, Rob.
The MK Ultron of soccer ordinances. Let's get an acronym going for that.
There we go. Yep. Okay.
And if you want to support the show, subscribe, totally free. That's very helpful. But if you want to take it a step further, memberships for $3.99. I think you get a membership, access to the Discord, bonus content, priority commenting, and so much more. Do that today if you are able. We thank you in advance. You can follow us on social media at mkickaround, X, Instagram, and Blue Sky. Write an email, morningkickaround@gmail.com, or you can find us as a podcast, Morning Kickaround, on your favorite podcast platform. All right, I'm going to get a quick drink. We'll come right back with our final topic of the day. Today's hot topic here on Morning Kickaround. Up next. Hot topic here on Wednesday's Morning Kickaround. One day after the third firing of the Major League Soccer season here of 2025. Mr. Mellberg out in St. Louis. So we look forward now with you mentioned it earlier, there is midweek games. So there are some folks on the hot seat that when we come back on Friday may well be in a segment of their own about losing their position. So there's a few candidates that, find themselves on a hot seat, and maybe a couple candidates that should be on there that aren't right now.
Yeah, I would say that each individual club is universe upon itself, right, unto itself. And that means it's sometimes difficult to get a sense of where the line is on a coaching change. Let's look at what's already happened in 2025. 25. These three gentlemen have been relieved of duty. First one, Laurent Courtois. He barely got any time at all this season. 5 matches, 1 point out in Montreal.
Yeah, how's that
Peter
benefited
Vermees.
Montreal, you know?
Yeah, not so great. Peter Vermees, 15 years, 18 years, 33 years on the job. I can't remember exactly. It was a lot of years.
Lifetime job.
Yeah. Got 6 games before getting fired this season with 1 point to his record. And then, of course, Olaf Mellberg just fired yesterday. 2 wins, 8 losses, 5 draws, 11 points. Underlying numbers not good enough for whatever it is that Lutz Pfannenstiel said. Those first 2 are early enough that it's kind of they're kind of outliers here, because we're now into a portion of the season where teams know that if they don't turn things around, it could be really bad. Now, as I said, the safety net is that you can make the playoffs in 9th place. You might lose that playing game and be done, but you'd have made the playoffs, and you could say on some level that is success. But I think there are lots of clubs, and this is a good thing for MLS. Lots of clubs have higher standards than that. So let's look at candidates maybe. These are 4 candidates that could be the next to go. Now, we don't wish anybody to lose their job, Rob, right? Especially in this current labor market.
In this economy, everyone needs a job.
Everybody, we need people with jobs. We don't want people to get fired. Ronny Deila, year 1 in Atlanta. Not great. 14 points so far. Does come off of a win, worth noting, right? That Atlanta United's last game out was a victory over Cincinnati. Cincinnati's a good team, so that maybe helps Ronnie's case. They play Orlando City tonight in Atlanta. Orlando's in 4th place, so this will be a challenging match for Ronny Deila. Troy Lesesne in DC. I like Troy Lesesne as a person. I've interviewed him a number of times. Talked to him when he was in New Mexico as New Mexico United's head coach. I think he's a bright guy. Hadn't been great so far in DC. 14 points so far this season. They're in 13th position. Last time out, the loss to the Red Bulls. That's a rival for DC. That's never a good look, and the Red Bulls aren't good this year. They host New England tonight. New England has been alternately bad and pretty decent so far, and has climbed the table to 10th place. It's like, I don't think they've lost in a while. They've have 3 straight draws. In fact, I didn't put Caleb Porter on this list, mostly because he's turned it around a bit in New England, and it's hard to justify him being a one of the top 4 candidates based on current record. Robin Fraser in Toronto. They've been loss, win, loss last time out to Nashville. They're just ahead of Montreal in the standings in the Eastern Conference. They only have 13 points, as you can see there. And then Pablo Mastroeni at Real Salt Lake, who's been around for a while and has done some good things, and I think outkicked his coverage, to mix my metaphors, at RSL. But I think there's a sense they have better talent than their results right now. 14 points. They are out in the Western Conference, obviously, and at this point are sitting, where are they sitting in the Western Conference, Rob? Trying to find
which team are you looking for?
RSL right now in the Western Conference.
They are sitting in a plum 12th position.
12th position. Just a point up on Sporting, who obviously has already fired their coach. 2 points back at Dallas. Eric Quill, maybe not in trouble yet, because I think that's a project more than anything in Dallas. And although Eric Quill will be suspended against Cincinnati tonight because of yellow card accumulation, so he's got that going for him, I guess. We didn't talk about LA Galaxy, obviously, because they just signed Greg Benny to a contract extension. Now, there's one more name that you said, where's this name? So I put him on his own page, Javier Mascherano. 23 points. Many more points than these other guys, but still maybe underperforming expectations in a team that's got Lionel Messi and Luis Suarez and Jordi Alba and Sergio Busquets and the crew. So, Rob, what do you make of the landscape right now?
I think that it's funny. Some of these guys that you had on screen had a little bit of Teflon spray or Kevlar spray on them and seemed to be bulletproof. Like, why has the coach in Toronto been given such a long leash? Is it because he has, just been set up with a team that is so that there's some understanding from the front office?
Well, I think at some point you get into a condition, Rob, where you're like, we can't fire another coach. We're just all we're doing is firing coaches, and we can't see. We just go, this guy and the next guy and the guy after that. And then you don't see, now you are not giving anybody a chance to actually settle into the job. And look, again, I know there's a tension here that is really difficult to pin down, because you look at a place like Mexico, guys get 8 games, and if they don't win, they're out. That's it. You're done. Because in Mexico, it's a short season for the Apertura. It's a short season for the Clausura. You want to make the Liguilla playoffs. In England, if you are hovering anywhere close to the relegation zone, you got to go. And maybe clubs are willing to make changes multiple times in a bid to find the right guy. But in Major League Soccer, where again there's a safety net, I think, and you recognize that because of the budget rules, sometimes you're digging out of a hole. You're trying to climb out of a hole that was not that coach's fault, Rob. That's part of it too, right?
It sure is. And when I was looking at that list of candidates, that Mount Rushmore of hot seat candidates, I was thinking, if is there a sports talk radio station covering soccer in Salt Lake City? Is Pablo Mastroeni, sidelining and handicapping, America's next top talent, Diego Luna? Is Diego Luna being limited, capped, and restricted by the coaching of Mastroeni? Your calls at 5.
Yeah, I think so. If I'm remembering correctly, and I don't live in Utah, I believe the son of the founder of RSL, somebody check me on this. The son of the founder of RSL, Dave Checkett's founded RSL, then sold the team and moved on. But I believe his son, Spencer Checketts, is a sports talk radio host in Salt Lake. So they might actually have a little more heat behind Pablo Mastroeni getting fired. There might be a little bit more talk about that in a place like Utah than there is in a lot of cities. I think Toronto has high expectations. They built themselves into they were really bad to start. Go back to 2007. They built themselves into a champion, one of the best teams MLS has ever seen. And it's been that decline, that crash back to earth has been, really tough, I think, for them to stomach. And I don't know that they see a path forward, right? I don't know that they see, what is the key to getting them back into the picture in Major League Soccer where they can be a contender again. I don't know. I mean, again,
who is the itchiest trigger finger? Who's got the itchy trigger finger here? Because I feel like these guys are all worthy candidates.
Let me bring this back up. Let's talk about expectations and ambition as part of the equation as to whether these guys are going to lose their job anytime soon. Atlanta wants to win. They want to win. Uncle Arthur wants to win. They've spent money. They brought in the league's best executive, the guy that's been the best executive in the history of the league in Garth Lagerwey. They brought in Chris Henderson to work with him again. That's the dynamic duo that turned Seattle into a powerhouse, and they're not seeing it yet. So Ronnie Dyla, probably because of the ambition of Atlanta, is in the most trouble, despite the fact that you could argue maybe he hasn't had enough time. Torley saying, I'm not sure DC has the appetite for another change right now, but it could happen. Whether or not they go out and spend money in the summer, maybe they give Troy a chance to work with new talent. Robin Fraser, again, we just talked about him. Mastroeni. I think RSL, look, the sale and new ownership in RSL, there is the family that owns the Jazz now own RSL. That recently just happened. They were sold for something like $600 million to go with Utah Royals, RSL, the MLS Next Pro team, and the stadiums. Maybe they want to make a statement. Maybe that's not their guy. So that could be trouble for Pablo Mastroeni.
One of the things that I'd like to think about on this is in concern of Ronnie Dyla. Okay, in my mind, that is the most aggressive will to win team we have on screen here. But with the general manager in charge, he's not a Lagerwey. It's not a rush to judgment guy. Has he been in the past? Has he backed coaches for maybe another round of new players because it seems like Atlanta's got a bit. Is it the coach setting them out wrong, or is the squad in balance there? There's something
I will point out that for all the success Garth Lagerwey had in Seattle, he didn't hire the manager. He didn't hire Brian Schmetzer in Seattle. Brian Schmetzer took over for Siggy Schmidt in 2016 before Garth Lagerwey arrived. I think I have my timeline right on that. So he's not the guy that picked the coach that ultimately helped Seattle win MLS Cup titles. So this he arrived in Atlanta and was trying to figure out, what the hell's going on there, Gonzalo Pineda and all that. This is the first guy that his leadership has picked as head coach, and it's not working out right now. So this is obviously, I mean, it's not to say that he couldn't find the right guy, but right now it doesn't look like they picked the right guy. And for all of the success they've had recruiting, signing the right players at various points, Garth Lagerwey and Chris Henderson as a duo, that picking the coach was not part of the thing they had to do. So who knows? Maybe that's the problem. Maybe they don't have a handle on the right coach, because, but on paper, Ronnie Dylan made a lot of sense. He won an MLS Cup, and maybe he had the skids greased a little bit back in 2021, but he did win an MLS Cup. He's had success in this league. Why wouldn't he be a good choice in Atlanta?
A bad visual there when he said the skids, and I thought of him in his underpants when he won the MLS Cup right at the same time when you said that. So that was a bad visual you sent me down there, Jason. I really thought he'd be he still has an opportunity, might still got life there. But if you have any thoughts in the chat on who you think might be next, do so now. In the next few minutes, we'll give you a shout out. If you haven't hit subscribe yet and you're watching this, hit subscribe now. It doesn't cost you a darn thing. You don't get any spam email. You don't get any of this. You just help this channel grow. And if you want to take it up a notch yet, be a member. There is all sorts of member perks, including access to the Discord, which is growing. You have priority commenting on here. You already have, you get priority access to content and so much more. You can find us on social media at mkickaround on X, Instagram, Blue Sky. You can write us an email, morningkickaround@gmail.com. And you can also find us as a podcast, Morning Kickaround, on your favorite audio app. Pamit making me chuckle there while I try to do the housekeeping thing. Ronnie leads to lose his underwear. Maybe that's the motivation to get Atlanta into the win column. And I saw it mentioned a couple times by some commenters here, noting that Gotham winning the CONCACAF Women's Championship, beating Tigres over the weekend, the inaugural Women's CONCACAF. So definitely a good note there, and congratulations to Gotham.
Now we need a Super Cup between Arsenal and Gotham, because Arsenal just won the Women's Champions League. That's what we need.
Yeah, I definitely, producer Jenny would celebrate that. Over the moon for Arsenal. Congrats, Jenny. At least one of the Arsenal sides had success. And then, become a member, join the Discord. We'll continue the conversation, and then we will be back Friday. Hopefully everyone still has their jobs, right? Take care. Until next time, everybody, enjoy your soccer.